I've also I've been increasing the workouts a bit more lately.
Okay.
So I think that combined with Thanksgiving leads to, being a bit tired, but, in a decent way. And actually, after we record this, I have another workout to do, but it won't be an intense one. It'll just be kind of like a longer duration, sort of endurance sort of workout. So any stories from Thanksgiving from you or anything along those lines?
Started rowing at the gym a little bit on every other day when I go. And my arms are killing me. My back is sore. I'm not a fan of it. Or my body isn't. But, it's how it goes.
Yeah. So like what have you been, have you been changing up your gym routine all that much?
I recently switched it to going 4 times a week instead of every other, like 3 times a week. So upper lower split. And just like I said, just this week I started doing, so when I do upper body, I'm doing my cardio through the bike. And then when I do lower body, I'm doing rowing just to kind of keep things flowing, keep things a little bit more entertaining.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's that.
Yeah.
I'm just tired.
Yeah.
I just don't want to think.
Yeah.
On the bright side of things, I think I've finally decided on, or at least have come to a conclusion, or at least closer to a conclusion of what my direction will be moving forward, especially as I think towards the new year, which is always kind of fun to think about because it's not like anything really changes.
Yeah.
We all say like, oh, we're looking towards the new year and we're going to do all of this in the new year, but why not just start doing it now? But
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you have in mind?
So one of my biggest deliberations was how I wanted to present myself online, and sort of that trying to figure out who I am in terms of which one of my identities, whether photographer or writer, I connect it more with. And I kept going back and forth and thinking about this, and the whole idea of, do I just, disappear off the internet and stay in the background just with the magazine and those sort of things, or do I push myself out there a little bit further? And as I was thinking about this, I was actually talking to Sarah Marino a little bit, and something that her and I were talking about, I think it had something to do with marketing, because I was asking her a few questions about that. But for some reason, something clicked, and it was just, so I've had this idea, and I believe I've talked about it before, of really diving a little bit heavier, or quite a bit heavier, into the mental health side of photography and art, and really pushing that more. And that's definitely the direction that I want to go into, of putting that as a primary focus for everything that I do. So still making that my writing is going to be a bit more prominent than my photography itself, but working out creating eBooks, creating or writing essays, doing creative retreats, and even the portfolio reviews or one-on-ones to help people figure out their direction, to help figure out how to heal through nature and that kind of thing, I think is going to be one of my biggest focuses through 2025. And so I'm slowly starting to revamp my website and figure out what I want to do with that as I think of all of this stuff. There's a lot to do with it, but
yeah. And it seems like to go in that direction, it seems like you do have to, push further and put yourself out there more.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Cause otherwise, it's hard to get the message out there if you're not putting yourself out there,
Yeah. It makes it a little difficult to, like you said, to get the message out there if, you're hiding under a rock. and screaming at the void.
It's a matter of having, finding that balance between building, I don't know how to say it, but by essentially, as I was saying, putting yourself out there, making your intentions known, but also not in a way that you fall into, because you've fallen into some traps in the past with, whether social media and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But, finding a way of sidestepping that while also putting yourself out there. And I will say that, the magazine stuff, that's great, though that's also a bit more of a limited audience. And I think it is important to have, a more broad way of getting out there, which would be, the form of the website
mm-hmm.
and the other things along those lines.
Yeah. So looking toward like even just the next month, really, it's going to be a lot of learning and focusing on email marketing is going to be my main, like the newsletter essentially is going to be my main way of reaching people. So I'm going to be delving into some of that kind of learning in the next month. Just because it's the easiest way for me to express myself in the way that I want to, while also providing some sort of benefit, That's going to be the focus for the next month. But also,
do you already have a newsletter set up where people can go to your site right now and sign up for it?
Yes, I do have a newsletter sign up form on my website, and I'll put a link in the show notes. I haven't done anything with my newsletter, I don't think, like at all this year. So
have you ever mailed anything out?
I have in the past, yeah.
Okay.
I've gone like back and forth on how I wanted to do it throughout the years. Because newsletter is always something that I believe very strongly in. And I know it is perhaps the only guaranteed way of reaching your audience is through a newsletter. Because there's no like algorithms to it. There's no buffers. I mean, unless you get stuck in spam.
That's been my issue. And it's probably because of the service that I'm using, but it's free. Because like when I'm going to send out an email to the mailing list I have, I'll have it send out a test one so I can just make sure I didn't like spell my name wrong and, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I check it goes immediately to my spam filter, to my junk box. So I'm just like, all right, well, if that's going to mine, and I've also noticed that it seems like it's a bit less effective lately, or people say, oh, I didn't get that. So I may have to change to a different one, probably one I pay for.
Yeah.
But at least I know I can export the list to a different service.
Right.
So, I mean, right now I'm using one called MailChimp, which I think is probably the reason why it's not very great.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that Squarespace has a system now as well.
Squarespace is what I was using. I was using their system for a while. I started everything on MailChimp. Back when it was like very much so we are just focused on newsletters and no landing pages, nothing else like fancy or anything. And then I switched over to Squarespace when they introduced theirs and was just paying for it, like, because at that point I think I was sending quarterly or something. So I just pay for it by the month that I used it.
Do you remember, do you have a feeling for how much it was costing? Because I know that they have it, but I have not even looked into it,
I think it was like $8 a month for like the very basic plan that has like their branding or something. It's not it's really not that expensive, but it also depends on the size of your list.
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
Right now I have my list, at least is being stored, and the sign up form that I'm using is through a service called Button Down, which is just a very basic newsletter sending platform.
Yeah.
But more than likely, I'm going to be going either with Flowdesk or with Kit over the course of the future, just because they allow for some more advanced features that I would like to have access to. Looking forward to everything. So, I don't know.
So, what type of stuff are you envisioning as far as sending out? Like just like writing paired with images, or in anything in particular?
That's what I'm trying to figure out right now. and I'm going through a couple different ideas in my head.
Yeah.
So it all kind of depends on how I want to do things, but I'm thinking I'll have maybe 3 separate newsletters. One will be a monthly newsletter. That'll be the main one that gets sent out. And that's going to be, I'll probably just have some links to recent essays, to whether they're on my website or to other recently published ones in other platforms, as well as, I don't know, maybe some links to things that I'm finding interesting at the time. Like I said, I have to flesh out the ideas around what I want to do to make it my own, to make it a little bit more unique, and also to maintain that priority of, like, this is about how to find healing in nature sort of thing, keep that theme going. And then I also want to set up an automatic, or 2 automatic newsletters, one of them for the podcast, so that anytime that we release an episode that gets sent onto my website, it just gets automatically sent to your email. Because I know that some people like to listen on the website or whatever. So, and then the other one is going to be photo streams. And this is an idea that that I really am ripping from David Kingham. I saw him doing it before I saw anyone else. So this is sort of like an alternative to social media, or my alternative to social media. So, so those will be those 3 newsletters that I want to prioritize.
There's so the photo streams one, is that just sending out just basically a handful of images with just a little bit of text? Is that what you have in mind for that?
So it'll be an occasional newsletter. I'm calling it every so often, or periodically, at least once a week, that'll be sent out, and it'll be a new photograph, or just a photograph of mine along with a paragraph of text. Real basic, that gets sent to your email, that's also archived in a blog. And the text will either be like the story behind the image, or some inspiration behind it, something along those lines.
Yeah.
Just as a way to, almost like I would use Instagram, post a photo and a caption, you know?
Yeah. Are you familiar with Brian Lackey?
Loosely. The name sounds familiar.
So he's a photographer living up in the Pacific Northwest, and he has a newsletter, I think he calls it Postcards, where it's mostly just a collection of recent images, kind of in the travel themed, I guess you would say, where a lot of it's, it might be like, people walking on a beach in some really kind of wild looking coastline, or, it's just like he has a really, really great eye for photography.
Okay.
And so I always enjoy his one. And I was looking through some of his recent ones. And so he'll have a series of photos, whether it's, like 8 photos or something like that. And then below that, he might have a few other things at the bottom mentioning, a print or something like that. But I always like diving into those because they're very image heavy. And it doesn't really take a lot of, like, if something's a bit deeper, if something's a bit heavier, perhaps, where you really have to find the right moment to absorb it, sometimes I will, set that aside. But one of the things I really like about his ones is that whether I am just out running errands somewhere and I see the email, I can just pop it open and look through it on my phone, or if I'm sitting on the couch, or if I'm on my computer. So it pretty much any time is a good time to look at it. And I think a lot of it is because it is image heavy, but in a very, very interesting way. So I'm a big fan of that style.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I just signed up for it, just went onto his website. I have heard of him through his YouTube channel. I watched one or two of his videos before. So
yeah, he's got a very good eye for, and he does some landscape type stuff, but I'd say most of it's more kind of like the travel sort of a style, something that look really good as like in a magazine, gives a bit of a sense of adventure, gives a sense of the conditions and the atmosphere and everything. But I've always really enjoyed his work. I remember seeing him on Instagram quite a while ago, and I think that's where I found out about him. But yeah, he's got some really good stuff.
Yeah. Like I said, there's a lot, and that's like I don't want to overthink any of this kind of thing when it comes to the newsletters, because the second that I start overthinking it, then I just bog down and don't do any of it.
Yeah. Which is why I think it's good to have some form of one that's light and easy and simple. Because otherwise you're setting yourself up for something that is difficult to take on.
Yeah, and I think that'll be nice with the photo streams idea, just because I can very quickly type up, I don't know, 150 to 500 words and send it off, and it provides me a way of sharing new photographs, the more experimental photographs perhaps, just in a different format, because I do miss social media, some aspects of it, like especially the connecting with others and being able to share my work on a more regular basis, and having that push would be nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the biggest things that I'm just thinking about right now, and just trying to figure out the details toward my direction moving forward, figuring out the site itself and how to revamp it in a way that is going to be best for what I want, while also keeping it as simple as possible. That's the biggest struggle.
That
I keep going back
part
and forth on.
Is certainly key.
Yeah.
Speaking of images, I had a little bit of a realization the other day. I was looking just through some pictures on Instagram, and I had a little bit of a realization, which is that individual photos very seldom impress me anymore. And I don't know if it's because of the impact of, the AI images that sometimes people are trying to play off as real images. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the fact that things are quite heavily processed to the point that they lose touch with reality. But then I was also realizing that although a individual image really rarely has much of an impact on me, which is, I'd say, is probably it's not a great thing. Collections of images, they still do. Something about seeing one image, and you're like, yeah, it's fine. That's even though it's supposed to be some sort of, spectacular image, it's just like, whatever. It is what it is. But when you see a collection of work and you start drawing, correlations between the images, you see a sense of consistency, you see a sense of vision. And I think this is something that AI does not do very well, because AI is just kind of like the scatterbrain stuff. Everything is sensationalist in a way, trying to create something that stands out, but just something about having collections of work, I think, is something that is going to be increasingly important as we move forward, with where technology is going with everything. And I think it's kind of sad, just the fact that seeing it's tough for me to be wowed by an image anymore. I don't know.
I don't think that necessarily is just because of AI. I think it's also because we are so used to seeing, in the very beginning of social media, when we began being bombarded by all these different photographs, a lot of them were like the grand vistas, the Mark Adamuses of the platform. And nowadays I'd almost say we're almost jaded over everything, you go on to someone's platform and, okay, there's another beautiful scene, a nice sunset, high color or high saturated colors, and even the intimate scenes. Sometimes it takes a lot to make you stop and think,
Yeah.
Whereas at least with collections or with a book, it's much more thoughtful of putting those images together, collating those images to create a series that actually tells a story that gives a little bit more than just that wow factor that you really have to rely on with an individual image. So I agree that their collections are going to be more and more important going into the future. But that said, you still need to prioritize the singular image, in the sense that a collection of poor images is still just going to be a collection of poor images.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I also think that there's something like, when viewing a single image, most days now, it's going to be on a phone. That's the way that we encounter stuff. If you view a collection of work, maybe not on a phone. Maybe it's going to be viewed on a bit of a larger screen. Maybe it's going to be viewed in book form or in zine form. And so I think also a larger collection of work is oftentimes going to be presented in a way that is just nicer to take in the work, a quieter space. And so maybe that also plays a role in it where, in some cases, maybe an image I just see on Instagram where I'm just like, whatever. But, take that image, you elevate it to a higher presentation where it's, framed, matted, hung in a gallery, and all of a sudden, you can stare at that image for quite a long time. So I think that's also a part of it where you can elevate the collection of work to a higher level with a less dramatic presentation with, just throw it in a zine or something like that.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something along those lines as well.
Yeah. The viewing experience itself, it drastically alters our perceptions of how we view the image or of the image itself. Like you said, it's so easy to just scroll through your phone. Okay, double click here, double click there. Those are nice photographs. But there's no thought to it. And whereas collections are something that I have been getting into more recently. And it's going to be part of, at least in some form, it'll be part of my website revamp because it has to be. I think of my Memento Mori series, my Americana series, even Acadia has become a sort of series of images over the years that they're all tied together by these various themes, these threads all run through them. And it's not, rarely is it ever just about the place itself. It's much more than that. It's like,
there's a deeper meaning behind the work.
Exactly. And as I think about how I want to present them, that's why I like the idea of portfolio ebooks. And I think that's why so many other photographers have resonated with this idea rather than...
there's been a shift towards that lately.
Right, because you're able to show not only are you able to better control the presentation manner of the photographs themselves, but you're also able to... It changes how the images are viewed. Like you go to a website, whether your phone or on your laptop, it's not the same as it once was or once may have been. Where if you have a ebook, you are deliberately sitting down. Okay, I'm going to take the next 5-10 minutes and look through this ebook, and really spend time with some of these images rather than just quick flip through everything. With all of this, it's just a matter of how much thought you as the artist put into it, but also how much thought as the viewer you were trying to put into it.
Now, with the collections you have in mind, do you see that as something where as you add more work to it, you might go through and remove some previous ones that maybe don't quite fit as well? Or do you see it as, once something's in there, it's pretty solid? What are your thoughts on that?
I think you should always be going through, and whether it's a portfolio or a collection, regardless what you want to consider it, I think you should always be going through and ensuring that your work still matches up to the quality of the rest of it. If you take this stunning photograph that you throw into the collection and then you have one from 15 years ago that's subpar now comparatively, I think that brings the quality of the entire collection down. There's story to that, sure, to show the progression, but at the end of the day, I think it's more important to show a solid collection of your work, especially if you want to collate it into a book or do something a little bit more with it.
Have you ever had a image that you pulled from a collection because you just didn't like it anymore, but then, I don't know, a couple of years go by, you look at it, you're like, no, that deserves to go back in there again?
Every so often, yeah. It's not a huge occurrence for me, but yeah, every so often I'll look through, I did that a lot when I was rescanning film, where I'd go and I'd see, I hadn't scanned this, or I had scanned it and I thought it was terrible, but now it actually looks half decent. So let's see what we can work with it. And then it ended up in my portfolio.
When you did that, did you edit it differently than in the past?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
My editing process is always shifting. I'm pretty consistent now, but it shifted quite a lot over the past few years.
Yeah. I've had several images where, I replaced it with some other image at some point. I added some images, I took some out, and then I kind of forget about those images I took out. On Squarespace, you can just deactivate an image. And then every once in a while when I'm adding a new one, I look at all those, deactivated images. I'm like, why did I pull that one out? That's not a bad image. And then maybe I'll open it in Photoshop. Maybe I'll tweak it a little bit. But I think, at least for me, it's easy to dismiss an image for one reason or another. But then given some time, I go back, I look at that image and I'm like, I actually kind of like that. Maybe it's not what I had in mind at the time. Maybe it didn't fit the collection of work at the time, but maybe my work has shifted into a little bit of a different direction. Maybe that image, pairs more nicely with it. And it's hard for images that live on my computer to go back to those old images. But at least in the context of on my website, it's easy enough to be reminded of them and to revisit them. But I really should dig back through some of the old work, because I'm sure there are some images that I wasn't feeling it at the time. But looking back on it, it's like, yeah, there's no way I could photograph that scene again. Maybe something's changed, maybe something along those lines.
Yeah, that's why I like working with Lightroom, and why I switched over to Lightroom after a few years of going back and forth between it and Photoshop. Just having that ability to very quickly look through the work that I have, and any of the images that I just don't think highly of, or regardless what sort of flaws they may have, I'll tag them as red so that I can just very quickly pop on that tag and I can scroll through the rejected work and just see if anything stands out to me later on. That at least makes it a little bit easier to work with right now.
There's a little while back, I don't know where it was, I saw, I had posted maybe it was a YouTube comment or something like that. And I think it was on one of the older videos I did, which was like a composition review or something like that. And I'll show just like I'll show the scan of the image and then just the tweaks I did to it to, make it into the final image. And someone commented that they liked the videos, but it sucks that I was using Photoshop, and that they just use Lightroom. Do you think people are scared by Photoshop?
I don't know.
Do you think they're intimidated by it?
I think Lightroom was always touted as like the more accessible younger brother of Photoshop. But
it's kind of evolved into a variation of Photoshop over the years.
All the features are quite similar. I mean, Photoshop's still more powerful, but I don't know. I don't understand why. It really doesn't make a difference which one you use. At the end of the day, however you want to edit your photographs, for the most part, you are going to get similar results across whether you use Lightroom or Photoshop or Capture One or Affinity Photo or any of the other various options that are out there right now. It's weird to use that as an excuse or whatever you want to consider it, as it's a shame you use Photoshop.
It's weird because like I have Lightroom, I have Photoshop. For this type of stuff that I do, there's not a lot of value in Lightroom for me, just because Photoshop is really where I do all the edits. I'm not working with the raw file. But I've taken some of the images I work with into Lightroom and edited them. But I find that with Lightroom, at least for working with film, it's a very roundabout way of doing things that would otherwise be very simple to do in Photoshop.
What do you mean?
Like in Photoshop, you just do a couple, an adjustment layer for curves or whatever, a simple mask. It's very quick, very simple. But in order to accomplish the same thing in Lightroom, it's a more elaborate thing, which I think is because the Lightroom started out as the more simple, stripped down, but then they've added more features over time. And I know it's also just because I'm used to working with Photoshop, but it's weird because you have Photoshop and Lightroom, both of which are very powerful tools. But I think a lot of people maybe they feel safe in Lightroom. They can do everything there. And I get the feeling that people are intimidated by Photoshop. So I don't know. It's just kind of a weird observation that I've had. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, like you said, Lightroom was always simpler. And it's also, at least I found it to be a little bit more intuitive because of working with the global adjustments. Whereas Photoshop is very, it's more refined. For the adjustments that you're doing, it's more localized adjustments. Unless you're using Adobe Camera Raw, which is built into it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I said, I use Lightroom just because I like the cataloging feature of it. I can throw together, like in my Lightroom catalog, I have my collections of for Memento Mori and for the various others, ones that are in progress that I'm not quite certain about. But I can quickly just throw images into those folders and see the entire thing at a glance, at a very quick view. Whereas with Photoshop, you can't do that as easily. You'd have to go into
Photoshop's not great for organizing stuff at all.
Right, exactly. And that's the biggest that's the biggest upside for me for Lightroom. Otherwise, I'd be fine with either. I've edited my film in both of them, and just most recently in Lightroom, and I don't know, my process doesn't change regardless what format I'm using, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So what else you got? Anything else going on? Anything new before we get to our artist of the week?
No, not really. Just tired.
Yes.
Going up to the cabin this weekend, hunting season. So go up there, get some work done, watching deer.
So you're not going to be hunting for Black Friday deals?
No, I'm not hunting for Black Friday deals.
Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah.
There's no good book sales going on as far as I'm concerned.
As if you need more books.
I always need more books, Ben. I just got, yes. I have one more on the way that I just ordered and one that I received the other day. It's nonstop. It's an addiction. Yeah. I need help.
I've actually been using reading more as part of my updated sort of workout schedule, just because it's something that forces me to sit still. Mm-hmm. And since rest is very important when it comes to all the training and stuff, I've been trying to up the volume in terms of how much training I do. Whereas like for the cycling stuff, I've been a little over 6 hours a week, which is a decent amount. But I find that I can go basically 4 days in a row of, like the first day will be kind of a really more intense workout. The next day will be kind of just a mild. The third day will be intense. Then the fourth day will be mild. And then after that, my body needs a break, either on the days after I've worked out or also on the rest day. I just make sure that I do a fair amount of reading, and it's just nice just to help recover that way. A little while back, I got these, it's called the Normatic. It's basically these sleeves you put over your legs and it inflates with air. Okay. And it like massages your legs. It feels really good, because like otherwise my legs start feeling like a little bit drained. Like a little bit kind of achy, but you put those on, it massages your leg. I'll just lay there and I'll read for an hour or so. I almost fall asleep as I'm like trying to read. But then like the next day, like my legs are all nice and fresh. But yeah, something between, taking the days off as well as, taking the time to recover. And reading's been a big part of that. So I've definitely been enjoying that lately as just adding to the routine. But it's all part of the fun.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah. I gotta keep reading. I gotta get back on that again. I keep slipping off.
Yes. Yeah, you do. Otherwise, this can be like a hoarding situation with just a bunch of books, and then your one path, through the house is going to collapse, and you're going to get stuck in there.
Yeah. That's one way to disappear.
Yes. I'll be in the book cave. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, so featured artist of the week.
All right. So who do we got this week?
So this week we have Nate Merz. And Nate is a South Korean photographer. I don't remember where I first found his work. It could have been on the LPW Discord. But you don't often see a lot of photography from South Korea. And as we said earlier, you really don't see anything at all from North Korea. So at least we get one of the Koreas.
Yes.
But just beautiful, again, of course, beautiful photography. A lot of grand vistas, at least from what I'm able to see of his work, because his website seems to be down or something along the sort. Or maybe my computer is just freaking out.
I'm on his Instagram right now. He's Nate.Merz, M-E-R-Z on Instagram.
Yep. And I'll have a link in the show notes. But just very, I don't know. I think a lot of it is because you don't see a lot of work from South Korea. So that plays at least a little part into why I'm fascinated by his work. Especially because I don't typically gravitate towards more of the grander scenes. But there's also a lot of, like, he focuses, at least on one of the slideshow carousels that I'm on. I think it's the third pinned post, so the right-hand pinned post from December 9th of 2020, where it's just a collection of these pine trees. And there's something intimate about them, even though they are a bit wider than what you would consider for, you know, a intimate landscape.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a really interesting mix of light and atmospherics, a little pop of color in there as well, and very unique looking trees. It's just such a fascinating landscape of like, you know, showing those smaller details, but in a larger scene, which is interesting. I do see some black and white work as well. On his Instagram, there's a photo. It was posted November 9th of 2022. It's the third one down on the left side. It's a black and white image of 3 pine trees. There's some fog, ground mist sort of conditions and some atmospherics.
Yep.
Very haunting image.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
There's another one. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th one down in the middle of like this river flowing through a valley with some light, you know, breaking through the mist. You know, sort of receding off into the background. Just really, he has a lot more larger scenes than you see a lot of photographers do. But just like you're saying, there's you know, more like small scene details in the foreground set against a large background, which is really neat.
And Instagram officially kicked me off completely from seeing anything right now.
Really?
It keeps doing this thing where it just says something went wrong. There's an issue and the page could not be loaded. And every so often it'll let me, like, it'll bypass it and let me see someone's Instagram page. But you
can't just refresh it or whatever.
I keep refreshing and nothing happens. I don't know. Yeah. It's like every social media platform is like, no, you have to have a site or an account with us or you don't get to see anything at all.
Yeah.
Not very nice.
It's like I'll have to give you the login for the Wilderness Influencer account or something, you know?
Yeah.
That way you can go on there, but you won't be pressured to post anything unless it's selfies in a red jacket, you know?
Yeah, there we go. We might have to do that just to bypass this because this is going to become a pain.
So you have access.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I still refuse to get Instagram.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Meanwhile, I'm paying for it. You know, I'm one of the suckers to get the blue check. You know?
Yeah, you're fancy.
It's a business expense. It's a write-off, you know?
My fiance always gets pissed off when I say that. When I say that it's a business expense, I tell her that I just spent $500 or whatever on X or Y thing. She's like, how or why? I'm like, that business expense, you know?
Yeah, which is true. It is true.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very, very good choice for the Artist of the Week. I do believe that it was through the Discord, the landscape photography world. Because I do remember seeing his stuff before as well, and that must have been where it was. Mm-hmm. But yeah, very, very cool body of work. And so people should definitely check it out. Check out his site. Check out his Instagram. I wasn't already following him, but now I am. So he's got some really beautiful work. I hope you enjoyed our creative banter. You can learn more about Cody's work by visiting his website, codyschultz.com. And you can find my work at benhorn.com. For further discussion, join us at patreon.com/creativebanter. It's a place where we can interact with you, the listener. And although we greatly appreciate those who contribute by joining a tier, discussions are open to everyone, whether you're a paying member or not. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you around next time.